Hi, my name is Amber Reese, and this is my farm. We named it Broken Oaks Farm. We're in Grand Slick, Kentucky. I'm a third-generation grower on this piece of land. It was originally my grandparents, and then it got passed on to my parents in the 1980s. And unfortunately, in 2006, I lost my parents suddenly. We had this piece of land, and we didn't really know what to do with it. And we'd come out on the weekends, and we'd start planting a vegetable garden, just like my mom and my aunt, my grandma had always done. And then pretty soon, when you have a vegetable garden, you have 1,000,000 pounds of produce and you don't know what to do with it. And then I learned how to can and learned how to freeze all the harvest, just like my mom had done. And I found myself doing more and more things. And it seemed to make sense at that time to maybe do something agricultural on the land for a little bit of money, because I was staying home with my 2 boys. And I thought, well, I can grow produce. We'll go to farmer's market and I'll try that out. But then I started looking around at all the farmers markets and realized there was already a lot of produce. And I thought, oh goodness, I'm a novice at this. I don't know that I want to compete with all these professional people who have been growing for years. And about that same time, I happened to find classes through the extension office that were beginning farmer classes. I already in the back of my mind had decided I wasn't doing produce. But while I was growing this big vegetable garden, I always planted a big bed of zinnias and a big bed of marigolds, just like my mom and everybody had always done. And so I thought, I wonder if anybody want flowers. And I was like, oh, that's kind of silly. Who buys flowers except if you're going to the florist? And I was like, I don't know, but it stuck in my head. And so I went through all the classes, and it gave me enough of a confidence boost when I was done. Then I signed up to do farmer's market at Boone County, and just to try it out. And people came. I cut all my flowers, took them in buckets to the market, and people showed up and people bought them, and I was thrilled. So I was like, oh gosh, I can do this. So that's how it started, and now it's every year it expands and it grows more, and I grow more and more varieties. And I've learned a lot of things through trial and error. The farm is bigger than ever, at least the agricultural part that we grow on. And we continue to do markets, and we've branched out now into selling to florists. And we even started a CSA this past year. We currently try to do low till, not no till. So right now I'm standing in, I say that, and everything's tilled up. A lot of stuff's tilled up, but we've hit the end of the season. So what we'll do toward the end of the season is till some things minimally and flip our beds and get them ready for next year. And one of the other things we do to get ready for next year is we often plant cover crops so that they can grow, keep weeds out, and then you can till them back into your soil, which helps the nutrients and everything in the soil. And it helps all the beneficial insects to have the cover crops there. We also go around, I do usually about November, once all the leaves have fallen off the trees. Around here we have a lot of oak trees, and so we pick those all up with a really big lawn sweeper on my tractor. I mulch all the beds that don't have things in them so that they can be, covered up for the winter, so they can get all tucked in. We have a passive solar greenhouse that we built ourselves. It has 2 very large water tanks in the back. We used refurbished windows that we had found from somewhere and stored away, and we put them in the front on the south-facing side. We got plans off of UK's website. The water tanks are very large, and the front is painted black, so they absorb heat all day from the sun. And when the temperature starts to drop in the evening, then it emits the heat back out into the room and keeps the room from freezing at night. We also tried to build some berms. We planted pawpaw trees on the rise of the hills, and then when it rains, the ditch part will hold all that water and transmit it out to the roots of the plants at a slower pace so that they can take all of it up instead of having it just wash away into the creek. We have a lot of pollinators here. We have several hives of bees back there. We have a back portion of our farm that we don't really use agriculturally, so that part of the farm we have allowed to kind of grow back into a natural environment that isn't empty of grass and all the things and all the wildflowers. So now it's full of things like goldenrod, ironweed, butterfly bushes, milkweed, all that kind of stuff is growing back there, and the pollinators love it. And when there's pollinators, there's also beneficial insects. So all of that helps, put back into our farming experience. I don't think farmers are in it for the money and the financial gain. I grew up on a farm, and it's just rewarding to be outside in nature. I think growing up on a farm made me be more in touch with nature. Besides financial reasons and besides just being in touch with nature, when I make my bouquets and I see people pick them up at market, you can see them having like a whole memory coming to the front of their mind of a lot of times they'll say, oh, especially if it's something like zinnias, they'll say, oh, my grandmother used to grow the prettiest zinnias in her garden. And that opens up a whole conversation where you can say, well, you know, you could grow some zinnias in your garden. And they're like, oh no, I could never do that. And then you can, you know, help educate people that, yeah, you can, it's not that hard. And I really enjoy talking to people and telling them, you know, how they could go about doing the same sort of thing just for their own enjoyment and their own good memories of it. And I think that's a really important factor in, you know, you get in touch with a lot of people that maybe you wouldn't normally. And people also gain an understanding, possibly by talking to you, that, you know, if you go to the grocery store and you walk past the floral section and you think, oh, those are pretty flowers, or, you know, that's a nice sunflower, well, they pick it up and you buy it and you take it home and it's gorgeous on your table and it really is pretty. But I like people to get in touch with where things are coming from. I think a lot of people nowadays, especially, everybody's so busy and things go so quick that you don't realize, you know, where your food comes from. You're just out of touch with nature. So if you can educate people that, hey, you got a choice, you could buy flowers from someone local that you had no idea even existed, or you could buy them from the grocery store, which is also a fine option. I mean, you're giving people jobs and things, you know, somewhere, and, you know, the flowers at the grocery store are just as pretty. But maybe you get to think about how long it took them to get here. You know, or did they get shipped on a plane? Were they on a boat for weeks? I mean, it's just a whole thought process that maybe you didn't have before. So it's nice to educate people about where things are coming from. The stewardship of it and the, you know, conservation of it really boils down to, I feel like I'm honoring my parents and all the people who came before me who have farmed this piece of land. My grandparents bought it in the 1950s, and it was the first farm I believe that they ever owned outright. They'd always rented places and moved around a lot, and we're all farmers. But it's like a whole history. When I walk around every day, it's like a history of all the people who were here before me. And I'd really like to take it, even the way I found it, which was in quite good care from my parents and my grandparents, and make it even better for our children if they choose to keep it, you know, when we're gone. And it's almost like when you're walking around here that you're walking around with all the people who worked this land before you and did all their part to try to make it a nice piece of property and a nice piece of agricultural land. And I'm just trying to continue that. I have some plans for things I'd like to implement. I would like to go back to trying to do no-till again and get the weeds all under control. I think that'll be a goal until I ever quit growing anything. But my main goal would be I'd like to possibly build a farm stand down the front so the community members can come through here and pick up flowers whenever they like. And they're locally grown and they're right down the road from their house. I think that would be excellent. I'd like to expand our CSA, which is the Community Supported Agriculture. So for that, people go ahead and prepay in our off season, and I basically promised them a bouquet in our growing season. That worked out pretty good. This was our first year for that. I would eventually like to get some high tunnels going down in the front and have earlier spring crops, or possibly even into the fall, that can't stand the frost but just need a little extra help. That's on my to-do list. And I mean, the Conservation District is an excellent resource. The most they can do is just keep doing their good work and offering, if they have classes, I would be glad to take them. You know, any kind of educational opportunity would be excellent.